We're here today to speak with one of the contributors to our new book, How to Heal Our Divides. Parker Palmer is founder and senior partner emeritus of the Center for Courage and Renewal and is a world-renowned writer, speaker, and activist who focuses on issues in education, community, leadership, spirituality, and social change. He's also now collaborating with singer-songwriter Carrie Newcomer on The Growing Edge. Parker holds a PhD in sociology from the University of California, Berkeley, as well as 13 honorary doctorates. He's the author of 10 books, including several award-winning titles that have sold over 1.5 million copies and have been translated into 10 languages. In 1998, the Leadership Project, a national survey of 10,000 educators, named Parker one of the 30 most influential senior leaders in higher education and one of the 10 key agenda setters for the decade. Since 2002, the Accrediting Commission for Graduate Medical Education has given annual Parker J. Palmer Courage to Teach and Courage to Lead awards to directors of exemplary medical residency programs. In 2010, Parker was given the William Rainey Harper Award, whose previous recipients included Margaret Mead, Elie Wiesel, Marshall McLuhan, and Paola Freire. In 2011, the Utne Reader named him one of the 25 visionaries on its annual list of people who are changing the world. And in 2017, he received the Shalem Institute's Contemplative Voices Award, given annually to an individual who has made significant contributions to contemplative understanding, living, and leadership. A member of the Religious Society of Friends, Parker and his wife Sharon Palmer live in Madison, Wisconsin. And so it is quite an incredible honor, Parker, to have you involved in this project. I mean, someone with all of the accomplishments that you've had, I'm very grateful to have you contributing to this.
Well, it's always a delight to be with you, Brian, and I'm honored to be part of your really important project. Thank you.
Well, it's absolutely our pleasure. And you've been doing this great healing work for many, many years. And so I think it would be completely an oversight if you were not, well represented within this sphere. So I, talked about your background, at least at a high level. Maybe is there anything in there or anything that I missed that you really want to highlight a little bit?
Well, thank you. Of course, as with anybody, right, that the resume is at such a high level that you don't know much about the person. So I think what I've tried to do in my writing is to talk about the struggles along the way, because I know that's a good way to connect with people. We all struggle. I turned 82 the day before yesterday.
I didn't realize it was that recent. Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. And my slogan is, even at 82, God ain't finished with me yet. So we'll see. There probably won't be any more books, but I'm sure there'll be surprises.
Well, I mean, you're still contributing in very important ways. So, I think that's really admirable and fortunate for all of us.
Well, thank you, Brian. You too.
So there's a couple of your books that I'd like to talk about a little bit more, just because I think they're so relevant to, things that are going on today. One of them is Healing the Heart of Democracy, and the other one is On the Brink of Everything. So could you tell us a little bit about both of those two books?
Sure. Healing the Heart of Democracy, as I recollect, was first published in 2004. And some folks have said to me, gosh, it's amazing that you got so far ahead of the curve with that theme. But it seems to me that Healing the Heart of Democracy has been or should have been on the American agenda from the very start of this nation. I think you'd have to be especially asleep these days and for the last number of years to fail to realize, to recognize that America has an original sin. And that sin, of course, is the enslavement of human beings who are called in our founding documents among those that God created equal. And I think religious people of every stripe, and certainly secular humanists, deeply believe in that equality theme. But democracy, American democracy from the get-go, failed to live up to that. And it's our ongoing national challenge, because rather than really ridding ourselves of the white supremacy and racist impulses that lie behind the enslavement of people of color, we've simply allowed all of that evil to morph into new forms. And most recently, sitting here in 2021, we saw it raise its ugly head again on January 6th in the insurrection. What has always intrigued me about the American experiment is that the founders of this country understood that it was an experiment and understood that there were no guarantees around success. And so, as grave as was their moral error, their participation in the evil of enslavement, they constructed a system of government that is all about making progress with things we get wrong. And the main thing I tried to do in that book was to talk about the unique genius, I think, of American democracy, which is an organizational genius that is intended to help us hold the tensions of life together in the body politic in a creative rather than a destructive way. One of the insights that really came home to me powerfully as I was doing the research for that book is that this country, to the best of my knowledge, is the first powerful example of a system in which conflict is not understood as an enemy of creative social change, but as an engine of creative social change. And so when the federal government is functioning as it should, with its tripartite division of power, and those three branches of government at the federal level are holding the tensions of democracy and checking and correcting one another. You know, when the White House doesn't own the Congress and the Congress doesn't own the Supreme Court, when that system of checks and balances is functioning as it should, we have a chance to keep correcting the things we keep getting wrong. And of course, as in any complex system, we get things wrong a lot. But over the course of time, America has managed to correct a number of things, especially when that federal system was working and when it was working well in relation to the states and all that comes with the federal state-local relationship. The system, however, falls apart if we, the people, who are really the cornerstone of American democracy, the system falls apart if we, the people, don't have that same creative, tension-holding capacity inside of us. So as you know, Brian, I begin the book with a quote from Terry Tempest Williams, who says, "The human heart is the first home of democracy," because it's where we hold those tensions. It's where we ask ourselves all those critical questions. Can we be equitable? Can we be just? Can we listen to each other rather than just talking at each other and work our differences through in a creative, generative way? That's the way any healthy system works, because there is no system that creates a perfectly balanced homeostasis or state of being. There are always things going off the rails and going wrong. And a healthy system has ways of bringing them back to true north. That's what American democracy looks like when it's functioning at its best, but it doesn't function that way if we, the people, don't have that capacity. So I talk a lot, as you know, Brian, not only in the democracy book, but in other books, about the fact that brokenheartedness is a necessary ingredient of the human experience. And certainly we feel it today with what's going on in this pandemic at home and around the world, the horrific loss of human life, the functioning and dysfunctioning of our government at various levels in relation to the pandemic and in relation to a lot of other things. The economic crisis that so many Americans are in and have been in, many of them for quite a while. So there's a lot of heartbreak going around. I think the task of those of us who care about the condition of the human heart, and I believe that among those who care should be educators of every sort and religious leaders and congregations of every sort. Among those who care about these things, I think we need to be helping people understand the two ways that the heart can break, and actually preparing people to walk this path toward creative rather than destructive heartbreak in a way that enables democracy's capacity to be creative rather than destructive around conflict to function more fully. So one way for the heart to break is that it can shatter into 10,000 pieces. And sometimes in that shattering process, that heart gets hurled like a fragment grenade at the ostensible source of its suffering, its pain. We saw that on January 6th, I think. I mean, I'm prepared to say it's clear there was white supremacy there was fascism there was anti-Semitism there. And there were some, certainly in the streets, there were broken-hearted Americans around the failure of this or that dream that they had once held for their lives. I think there were a lot of privileged people too, who didn't really have a right to the kind of heartbreak they were expressing. But that's a topic maybe for a different thread of discussion. So that the heart sometimes breaks open in that destructive way. We've seen it around the world for as long as we've been here. But it's also possible, and we see this all the time, for the heart to break open into largeness rather than apart in an explosion. At my age, and I'm sure at your age too, we've known many people who've lost the dearest person in their lives, and their heart feels shattered. It's like they can never put their lives back together. That's the feeling. And they go into a long sort of underground phase of mourning and grieving and imagining nothing will ever be the same. But so many of them eventually emerge. I've seen them emerge, surprised to find that their hearts have actually grown larger, more compassionate, more understanding, with a greater readiness to reach out to other people, to support and assist other people. Their heart has grown larger, not in spite of their suffering, but because of their suffering. And so the book, Healing the Heart of Democracy, is, I think, filled with examples of how we might help our hearts become more supple, not just on the personal spiritual front, but also on the political front, because our lives necessarily operate at several levels, personally, privately, in community, socially, and politically in the larger scene. And I think a full human life needs to involve touching in with all of that as the days go by, because it's in our hands. And nobody else is going to do democracy for us. And we treat it as a spectator sport at our peril. So I'll just say one last word, that I tried to write a book about politics that was informed as much by world wisdom traditions and the great traditions that are taught and studied in a liberal education, and not so much by polling data and political means of manipulation, which is how we normally approach politics, we take the heart out of it when we write about it and talk about it. It becomes armed combat or some sort of complex game rather than the heartful enterprise that it has to be, because ultimately what we're talking about is the right use of power in all the forms that human beings are capable of gaining power. And with power comes great responsibility. And what we want to see in this country is less and less the irresponsible use of power that we saw on January 6th, motivated by white supremacy, racism, anti-Semitism, and as many evils as you can name in the contemporary world. We want to see less of that and more deployment of power toward the fact that there are unacceptably large numbers of people, children, starving in this society right now. People dying in isolation, wars being fought abroad that we have responsibilities in relation to, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, healing the heart of democracy is something around which we have big stakes. And it's not simply about making nice with one another. It's really about helping democracy fulfill its potentials before we lose it. Because I think we are at a critical juncture in the history of this country where the risk of losing our democracy becomes more prominent, or should become more prominent, as we look out on the scene of which we are a part.
Well, I know that's a really important book that has meant a lot to many different people. So, I don't know, I appreciated your perspectives in that book greatly.
Thank you.
So tell us about the more recent one, On the Brink of Everything.
Right. Well, the first thing that comes to me, so this is On the Brink of Everything is a book that I published, I guess, in 2018. So it's fairly new.
Right.
And I published it around the time of that I was headed toward 80 and could no longer deny that fact. And I was, as I always do in my writing, I was trying to wrap my mind and heart around issues that were most challenging to me at the moment or during the time that I was writing. And certainly aging was very much on my radar at that time. I was starting to feel more of the physical, mental, psychological impacts of aging, and to hold it, even more deeply in my own spiritual life, although that's something I had been doing really from a pretty young age. I remember when I was actually in my late teens, maybe early 20s, I read, even as a Methodist young man, I read a line from the Rule of Benedict, Saint Benedict, the founder of monasticism back in the 4th century. And one of his rules for the monks was daily keep your death before your eyes. And I must have been a little bit of an unusual, late teen, early 20s guy, because I didn't dwell long with the notion that that's sort of a morbid thing to be doing. It actually came to me pretty quickly that if you did daily keep your death before your eyes, it would increase the preciousness of life, and it would enhance life in many ways. You would be more grateful on a regular basis for the gift and the gifts of life. So I had cultivated that theme for quite a while, but eventually the need to write about it overtook me, and I wrote a whole lot of short pieces that eventually got put together in this book, which I've always been glad for. I'm one of those writers who says stuff and then needs to go back and listen to what he said. So as I've aged farther along than I was when I wrote that book, I've gone back and tried, have reread what I understood at the time and have found it helpful on many occasions. So I think that's a fancy way of saying I've been talking to myself, but that's something I think we all need to do. We
Yes.
could all probably do more of. My main theme in that book, Brian, I think is maybe caught up in just a little aphorism that I obviously borrowed from Chris Christopherson and Janis Joplin. And that is, old is just another word for nothing left to lose. So get out there and do something for the common good. I feel very strongly that not only is our culture, our society wrong to sort of marginalize older people, not just sort of marginalize, but really strongly marginalize elders. I think the elders make a mistake by buying into that mythology and letting it get them down. Yes, there are physical limitations that come with aging. There are mountains I can no longer climb, literally and metaphorically. I probably will not write another book because it's a long distance run for me, 4, 5, 6 years to write a book. And I just don't have the stamina for that anymore. But that doesn't mean I can't write. So I write a lot of shorter pieces, as in the piece that I wrote for this book you have coming out on healing our divides.
In today's world where, brevity is so much more important, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. And at the same time, I laugh every time I post something on Facebook that maybe takes, I don't know, 60, 90 seconds to read, and somebody shares it and says, this is a long read, but it's worth reading. I think, well, whoa, let's readjust.
That puts it in today's perspective, doesn't it?
Let's recalibrate that, folks. But I feel that age brings with it so many opportunities. And one of the great opportunities for those of us who are willing to reach out is to turn around, as it were, and help the younger generation along. Which if you know how to do it, if you know what that means in a non-condescending way, if you know, for example, that the younger generation has a lot to teach you, and it's not just you who have some things to teach them, the younger generation can actually, when you turn around and reach out to them and engage creatively with them, as I've been privileged to do on so many occasions, they actually have the eyes and ears to help us elders understand the emerging horizon of life that they see and participate in so much more knowingly than we do. I think for a lot of elders, the sort of baseline is, I don't understand what this world is all about anymore. I just don't get what's going on. I don't get the music. I don't get the lyrics. I don't get what it is that fascinates people or repels people, why they like this and like that. And I think you feel more at home in the world if you just begin to ask that younger generation and to understand how it looks from their point of view. You don't have to like it the way they do, but to understand makes you feel more at home. And I've always felt, Brian, that we humans have, among our basic instincts, we have an instinct, a desire to feel at home in our own skins, and a desire to feel at home on the face of a very diverse earth. And one way I get there in old age is to relate to younger people as a learner, not only a mentor, but mentoring is also important. Encouragement is important. It's important to do what a great teacher always does, which is to see more in that younger person than they see in themselves. I mean, you and I are at an age where we can look back and say, wow, when I was 18 or 22 or whatever, I had no idea that I had in me the capacity to do some of the things we've actually gone ahead and done in life. I was the first person in my family to go to college. So I never imagined that I would have a career as a writer or a teacher or anything of the sort. And if I look back more than 5 seconds, I quickly see those older figures on the horizon of my life, those mentors who helped me along by seeing more in me than I saw in myself. One of the themes of the book, of course, is pay it forward. I owe a great debt of gratitude to those mentors who helped me along. And while I stayed connected with many of them for a very long time, in fact, I still have one great mentor of mine alive and well at age 95, and he and I talk every now and then. They're not around for me to express my gratitude, but I can pay it forward. I can pass it along to the next generation. And I learned so much from people who are half my age and less. I have a number of colleagues in that age range. And I count my work, my time, my friendships with them as very precious and full of potential for my own life.
Well, you may learn from them, but I know that they're learning an awful lot from you. And, one of the benefits of our age, right, is that we've had a lot of experiences and, had the benefit of learning from those experiences that just by sheer time, right? I mean, we've been in different places, we've been in different situations, and someone who's younger just hasn't had that much time, in at least in some cases, right? In many cases, to have had the breadth of the kind of experiences that we have. So
yeah, and right now is especially difficult time, as you know, for a lot of the younger generation. They're having trouble pursuing that career that they thought they were getting started on because everything is locked down under COVID conditions. So there's a lot of young people out there who need that encouragement and support. And I sometimes think, Brian, that, and I have a number of conversations along these lines, that one of the biggest things that you and I, people in our general age range, can share with younger people is that it is possible to find your way through really hard times. As you know, I've written about hard times in my life and times when from inside the experience, I wasn't sure I could survive, literally, as when I have gone into deep depression a few times in my life. But I survived, and then comes the question, how do you find meaning in what would otherwise be just a meaningless experience of devastation and really annihilation at the depths of clinical depression? Well, one way you find meaning is to put that experience in service of other people. And it's an opportunity in one's elder years to find more meaning in one's life journey by putting it at the disposal of others. That doesn't mean phony cheerleading. I think one of the things it means is a profound empathy with just how hard it can be when you feel like you're looking at your own life falling apart in front of your eyes or around your head. I think it's really important for elders to understand that mentoring the young does not mean sitting them down and saying, now listen up, I've got some things that you need to know about life. Like rotate your tires, or don't feed your brush, floss when you brush, or don't feed your dog cheese or whatever. But it means instead, let's talk, because I I want to understand how life looks from your point of view. And if you can genuinely feel that, your own need as a learner, which I genuinely feel, because as you know, I mean, one of my taglines is I was born baffled about virtually everything. That's really what's animated my writing, is trying to untangle my bafflements. But I genuinely feel I have so much to learn, and I will feel that until the day I die, and I just want to keep learning. And young people are a great source of insight for me. And once you enter into that two-way possibility, then the opportunities for mentoring just open up and flow freely and well.
So your chapter in our book, How to Heal Our Divides, is focused on the Center for Courage and Renewal, which has been an outstanding organization for several years now. So maybe for folks that are not as familiar with that, could you tell us how it got started and what the primary areas of work are today?
Sure, I'd be delighted. Yeah, and of course, I'm delighted with your book on healing our divides, and to make a small contribution to it with this chapter, I think titled something like Healing Our Divides from the Inside Out or something like that.
Yes.
So the Center for Courage and Renewal has actually been up and running for 25 years and kind of gaining momentum as it's gone. We now have, I don't know, maybe 300, I'm not quite sure of the latest number, facilitators in this country and around the world who use a process called circles of trust, which can take retreat form or other forms in smaller, more temporary settings, especially with people in the helping professions, to assist them in rejoining soul and role. That's one way to put it. Another way to put it is we help them bring their identity and integrity more fully into their personal, professional, or vocational and political lives. So it's really an organization that's focused on assisting people, or I should maybe put it differently, providing a context in which people in the helping professions, teachers, healthcare professionals, nonprofit leaders, religious leaders, both lay and ordained, etc., in which these good folks who are doing a lot of heavy lifting in our world have an opportunity to kind of reclaim the wholeness with which they came into this world and put it at the service of the important work they're doing, with the consequence being a more sustainable life for them, because these professions are really tough and they operate under really challenging conditions, and also better outcomes for those they serve. We actually have clinical research showing that a physician or a healthcare worker who is in touch with his or her own inner life, and sometimes that could be called a spiritual life, does a better job at evoking that healing resource in other people, namely the healing resource of the patient's spiritual life or inner life. We know from clinical research that mind, body, spirit medicine works, and it works better than just treating a patient like a broken machine to be fixed, where that patient gets objectified by a doctor who is basically objectifying him or herself and doesn't know anything else to do with the patient but treat them like an object. Well, treat them like a human being, cultivate a good doctor-patient relationship, and that whole dance changes. And the same is true in schools between teachers and students. The same is true in any walk of life, I think, no matter who it is we're working with or relating to. If we can go into that more whole than we normally do, we're going to evoke that wholeness in the folks whose lives we touch. That's what good parenting is about. And it's what good work of every sort is about. So we provide this circle of trust process, and led by any of our 300 facilitators, for groups that are shorter and longer term, normally no more than 25 people at a time, because this is deep reaching work and we don't do it up on stage in front of 5,000 folks. It's not cheerleading. It's really making safe space for the soul to speak, for inner identity and integrity to speak and to make its claim on people's lives. So one of the things I like to say is that our circles of trust are not about facilitating a conversation between diverse people, although that happens as a byproduct of what we do. They are instead about facilitating a deepening conversation within each person in that circle, so that we give them a chance in community to go more deeply into conversation with their own inner teacher, their own soul, their own identity and integrity. And it has powerful results. It's work that's directly related, as I argue in my essay for your book, it's directly related to the healing of our external divides, because those external divides are so often animated by inner divides in ourselves. I think Carl Jung was the great teacher of this truth, that there's a lot of stuff that lurks in the shadow of our own lives. The part of our inner selves that we want to deny and keep at distance, and therefore don't probe and explore, because it contains a lot of stuff that we don't like about ourselves. But when the shadow goes unexamined, what happens is we project that shadow on other people. I'm really, really struck, and I'm about to say something with a sharp edge, but I want to say I mean it. I'm really, really struck by how the proponents of white supremacy undermine their claim in their very being. Just study the film of the January 6th insurrection. Most of the folks inside that building were white supremacists. And ask yourself what's supreme about their behavior, their speech, their attitudes, their demeanor, their profound disrespect, their assault on the police, despite the fact that they have a rhetoric about respect to the police, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's projected shadow. That's stuff inside themselves that they don't want to confront. It takes a grown-up to confront that kind of thing. And I think what we're going to see as these cases come to court and these individuals are more fully in the spotlight is there weren't a lot of grown-ups in that crowd. In fact, I reckon there were none, because that's not the way a psychologically mature person approaches the solution of a problem. If they were offering me a vision of an alternative government, no thank you. There's not a one of you that I would want to be the Secretary of Education or hold the keys to the US Treasury or conduct our international relationships. Thank you very much, but goodbye. It's this work to come into deeper communion with all the parts of ourselves, the shadow as well as the light, is work that ultimately we're doing on behalf of other people, because as we get there within ourselves into that sort of original state of human wholeness in which we're all born, we are much less likely to objectify other people and scapegoat them as the bearers of all the things that we don't like about ourselves or of all the worst propensities we have. And I think it's very important to understand that everything I'm saying here about this quest for wholeness revolves around a little different understanding of what wholeness is like. Wholeness doesn't mean some sort of moral purity or, supreme attainment, which I at least am never going to get there. Wholeness, I think, means being able to say, I am all of the above. I am my shadow as well as my light. I am my brokenness as well as the pieces that work well and hang together. I am my flaws as well as my strengths, my liabilities as well as my gifts, because there's something about claiming all of it as your wholeness, integrating that which is broken into your sense of being whole. There's something about that that causes us to stop fighting with ourselves. And when we stop fighting with ourselves, we don't have to fight with other people all that much. And we certainly are able to withdraw our projections from the folks that we want to scapegoat as the source of all misery in human life, the closer we get to understanding that we ourselves are the source of our own misery. I'm prepared to believe that in that crowd on January 6th were some people who have been marginalized by the society, by an unjust economy and so forth and so on. But I'm going to risk a big bet on the notion that a lot of those people were self-marginalizing and that they had lived a lifetime of sort of justifying themselves by marginalizing themselves. It is sometimes a choice that people make to just stand outside of it all as the critic rather than to join those who are trying to build something on a very complex and contested field of play.
So, as you know, one of the objectives of our book is to give people specific ways that they can do something themselves.
Right.
So the different methods that someone could get involved with the center, they can hire a facilitator to work with their organization.
Right. There's all kinds of things, yeah.
Can an individual attend one of the circles?
Sure, absolutely. So just to tick it off quickly, first thing you can do is people can do on a practical level is to get a hold of my book, A Hidden Wholeness, The Journey Toward an Undivided Life. I think that was a 2014 book. And learn the operating code for this circle of trust process. A Hidden Wholeness, The Journey Toward an Undivided Life. It's a Josie Bass book. And it's now out in paperback with a manual for use by people who want to employ some of these methods in congregation or a classroom or a voluntary association of some sort, whatever. So I'd start there. There's a lot of references in there and online links to the work of the Center for Courage and Renewal. And if you go to the Center for Courage and Renewal, you'll find videos of me talking about these things in a kind of instructional way. And you'll also find a calendar of events that are currently, of course, online events and retreats that people can sign up for and experience the process at work, not just see it, but participate in it. We're, like every organization, we're feeling hampered a bit in what we can do online versus what the effects we get when we're face to face. But our facilitators are doing an awfully good job adapting to this new environment. And the practical help is available right there. We also have a facilitator training program that is currently being redesigned, but it's being, we had opportunity to field test it in both Europe and Canada, and it's going wonderfly well there.
So you're actually recruiting or looking for additional facilitators?
Yeah, and there's a path outlined at the website which is courageandrenewal.org, or just Google Center for Courage and Renewal, or Google my name, it'll come up pretty quickly. A path outlined there to apply for facilitator preparation. Again, we don't do things en masse. So facilitator preparation is a selected group of people who seem to be located in a way and to have intentions that would allow them to use the preparation we give them, in a multiplier way through an organization or their own independent work or whatever. So there are lots and lots of practical tools available and I have footnotes, as you know, in the article to both the center's website and to the book, A Hidden Wholeness, that folks can get access to.
That's excellent. And what an amazing kind of armada of tools and resources and ways that people can actually do something about healing art.
Yeah, well, you'd be, as somebody who's in the book biz big time, you'd be interested in the fact that in 2014, or maybe a little before that, when I was contemplating writing a book about the operating code of the Center for Courage and Renewal, kind of giving away the recipe for Coca-Cola or whatever. There was a debate, a conversation in the Courage and Renewal community. Is this a good idea? Because I put it to them. I said, do you want me to do this or not? I want to serve you. I don't want to disserve you. And some people say, well, if you do that, people are going to just try this stuff on their own. And I said, isn't that sort of the point?
Exactly.
So we want them to do that. We obviously want people to do it well, because quality control is a really important part of our work. And there's a very simple reason for that. If we put out a promissory note that a circle of trust is a safe space for your soul, a safe space for you to expose vulnerabilities, shadow side issues in your life, things you're wrestling with, we want to deliver on that promissory note. And so if you want the imprimatur, as it were, the seal of approval of the Center for Courage and Renewal, you have to go through our facilitator preparation process, and so that we can certify that you're ready to hold this considerable responsibility, which I frankly regard as a sacred responsibility, to hold a soul safely, whether it's one-on-one or in a group. But people have done some wonderful things with the Circle of Trust process, or particular components of it, when they go to their own workplaces and realize, I'll give you a simple example, realize that every time they have a staff meeting of maybe 8 people, they could take the first 20 minutes to ask a simple question and evoke brief answers to start building interpersonal knowledge and therefore interpersonal trust on that staff. Because people in many organizations work alongside of each other for 20 years and don't know any more about each other at the end of that time than they did it on the first day. But if you start a staff meeting by saying, okay, let's go around and tell a quick story about the first time you made $1 at a job outside your home, tell that story. So I grew up in such and such a place, and I mowed lawns when I was 12, or I was a caddy starting when I was 14, or whatever it may be, I worked in a drugstore when I was 16. People just start to get little pictures of each other that it doesn't take long, but it weaves a web of community. It creates a weave of community, which the more resilient it becomes with repetitive storytelling over time, Tell us about an elder in your life who means a lot to you. Tell us about the best vacation you ever took, etc. Non-threatening questions that simply invite people to share parts of their lives that they like to think and talk about. That resilient fabric is there when the hard times come. But if the hard times come when it's not there, there's no way to weave it in an emergency. It has to be an ongoing function. So we've talked with healthcare folk and with teachers and with nonprofit leaders and people in religious leadership who've said, gosh, that simple act in various configurations of people that we work with has really made a huge difference. And that's just an example of a module that we use, this sort of personal storytelling stuff that people have adapted.
Well, I can testify to that fact. I mean, in my own business career, I was not exposed to the training that you all have, but I employed that exact process in some of my leadership teams that I led. So
that's great.
You know, and I've believed that the most important business asset is relationships. And taking the kinds of steps that you're describing to solidify those relationships is incredibly important for the resilience of an organization.
Well, knowing you, Brian, that doesn't surprise me, but I'm, of course, glad to know about it. It's amazing to me, and I'm sure it is to you, that we have all this research on the importance of what researchers call relational trust in the success of any enterprise. It's just across the board. If you don't have relational trust, the other stuff doesn't matter that much. You know, you can have great governance, you can have a lot of money, et cetera, but if you don't have relational trust, things start to fall apart. All that money you've got in that organization, without relational trust, people just fight over it. With relational trust, they figure out how to deploy it and multiply the loaves and fishes. So we need to invest much more heavily in relational trust than most leaders understand that we do. And we can loop back to democracy, can't we, to the situation in the United States right now. It's the absence of relational trust. And frankly, it's leaders who consciously and strategically undermine relational trust that has us in what Quakers would call deep oatmeal.
Yes, exactly. Well, Parker, I so appreciate, again, you being part of this project and even more all the work that you've done over these many years of helping people and helping shed a light, you know, for all of us to follow. So,
well, thank you, sir, and back at you. It's good to be part of your community.
Well, thank you so much, Parker, and we'll be looking forward to learning more and collaborating together in new ways.
Thanks, Brian. Take good care of yourself.
You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.